welcome to Books and Brews Light, number 12. And our guest today is John Bukowski, who is many things, has been many things in his life, but I will let him tell you about that. And so before we really jump in, I would like to ask people to like, share, comment, and subscribe to help our channel grow and help us keep bringing you lots of great authors. So, John, would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh, thank you very much, Laura. I'm John Bukowski. I like to think of myself as the most highly overeducated author in the world as far as fiction goes. I have both a veterinary degree, Doctor of Veterinary Medicine, a master's in public health, and a doctorate in public health. So I have been many things before I became a fiction author, but I've always been an avid fiction reader. And back into my grade school years, I had three passions, and I've still got them. One is history, one is English reading and writing, and one is science. And I focused on the science, and now I'm circling back to the English reading and writing. Although I've been an avid reader.
I had to laugh when you said you've had three passions and you've done them all. I was a little bit the same way. I wanted three things in life. I wanted to write, I wanted to play music professionally, and I wanted to work with dolphins. I've played music and I've written and I've gotten to swim with dolphins, if not.
There you go.
So I don't know, maybe I'll have to add becoming a veterinarian to my list.
It's a long haul. I wouldn't recommend it as a casual affair.
No, and we have a lot of animals around here, but I don't think I want to do medical work. I'm kind of busy. So tell us about your books.
Well, I certainly have two books published. I have a lot of other ones that I'm seeking publication on, but there's two published through Pathfinder Publishing. One of them is Project Suicide. That was my first one back in 2022. It's the story of how a cure for Alzheimer's is perverted into an assassination drug. Now, high-profile politicians are killing themselves, and only a drunken genius can save the country.
That is a great setup.
I think that's a pretty damn good pitch.
I think so, too.
The other one is Checkout Time, and that was published in 2023. And I submitted it for 2 awards this year. I submitted to one. My publisher submitted to one. Mm-hmm. And it was a finalist in both. So
congratulations.
Thank you. I think that's pretty good. It's the story of a mysterious bomber known only as Conrad Hilton, who wants to extort money from hotel chain owners. Mm-hmm. You pay me money or I'll bomb your hotels. He's pursued by a beautiful FBI agent and a handsome government researcher I've modeled after myself.
I love it.
Until Conrad turns the tables and the hunters become the hunted.
That's a good setup, too. So before I ask you some questions, normally I've done a lot of non-alcoholic drinks for these, but today I thought, deep in my memory, I remember there is a cocktail called the Suicide. So seemed appropriate. I didn't feel like going out and buying alcohol, so I made some substitutions. So who knows if it tastes anything like what it should. It called for white cocoa liqueur. I have cream de cocoa.
Okay, that probably work. Sure.
You think it'll taste similar?
That'll work.
I'm not a connoisseur of alcohol, despite doing this program. It called for Haitian rum. I only had gold rum.
That'll work. Rum is rum.
We'll see. It called for soda water. I had tonic water.
Well, tonic might be a problem because soda is basically tasteless. It's just fuzzy. Tonic has a very strong taste.
I thought they were pretty much the same. And so the one thing of the 4 ingredients that I didn't have to substitute, I got the ice cubes just right. So it's ended up being completely clear. Don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
And in our new Books and Brews mug. So cheers.
Stolat, as the Poles say.
That's a very strong drink. Wow, it's strong. I'll leave it at that.
I'm
I
having my signature drink right now, a Manhattan, which
how
is
is it?
oh, it's wonderful. I make the best one. Usually when we go out, I have wine or beer
Hmm.
because most bartenders can't make a great Manhattan.
Why
Uh,
is that?
I don't know. They always. I think part of the thing is I like them with a little sweetness to them because
Hmm.
it's part whiskey, typically rye or bourbon. I'm
Hmm.
actually using a mix right now of Knob Creek half and half rye and bourbon. They sell that
Okay.
and sweet vermouth, and it's 1 part sweet vermouth to 2 parts whiskey. And most bartenders want to put a drizzle of sweet vermouth, like they're making uh, a dry martini. You just put a
Hmm.
drizzle, and so it doesn't taste right to me. But that's why I can enjoy a good IPA or a good Cabernet when I'm out.
Right. Yeah, I'm not a huge beer drinker, which again, the irony, it was this program was my publicist's idea years ago when I had a publicist. And she was like, "Well, you've got to get yourself out there. What if you do books and brews?" And she went and she found me a beer cicerone of all people, who happened to be Minnesota's first beer cicerone. So he and I did it together for a long time. And now we've added Books and Brews Light, where it's a shorter interview. But that's why someone who doesn't even like beer and doesn't drink that many cocktails is doing a program with beer.
Right.
But it's been fun. I've learned a lot. So um, how did you get from all these degrees to writing? You said you've kind of always wanted to write.
Yeah, they like I said, was English. My English classes, history classes, and science classes were my favorite.
Mhm.
I focused on science, and especially if you want to get into veterinary school, you've got to focus on science.
Right.
So I did that. I had to put the other things kind of on the back burner, um, and got my veterinary degree. Practiced in Michigan. Felt the need to transition out of veterinary medicine, and so I went into public health. I got a master's and a PhD in public health epidemiology, which is
Hmm.
which is the study of disease and patterns.
Right.
And the did that in government and industry. But I noticed over time that I was doing less and less research and writing more and more. And the
Okay.
reasons were twofold. I enjoyed it, and two, my bosses saw I could write. If there was an
Hmm.
important paper to be written or something, I usually got it.
Okay.
So when I left the corporate world back in 2004, I became a freelance medical writer. I wrote all kinds of things, advertorials, journal articles, consumer handbooks, all kinds of things. And then when business dried up during the Great Recession for a little while,
Hmm.
I took my hand at fiction writing because let's face it, what writer doesn't want to write the great American novel? I mean,
Right.
no matter what you write, you can do copy editing or copywriting for advertising agency. You want to write a novel. So I
Right.
wrote one. It's still on my computer.
Hmm.
Uh, Never going to go anywhere, but it got me hooked. And I started writing short stories and other novels. And eventually, around 8 or 9 years ago, I said, you know what? We're set financially enough that I can do this full time. And I've been having
That's
a blast.
that's a great path. And I think a lot of people have gone that route. I started writing, oh, well, probably when I was 8. And then I took a break for reasons I won't go into, got back to it a few years later. And I was curious because much of my writing involves my life experience of music. I don't have as much experience as medieval warriors, so I had to do some research there.
Right.
But how much does your work as a veterinarian and as a health writer, how does that play into your writing or impact your writing?
Well, it was quite a bit for the first book, Project Suicide, because that one has some genetic components and stuff like that about how the drug works. Um, and all of my characters, my protagonists often have a veterinary background and things
Mhm.
like that. It enters into it. Um, but I think really that all the characters that you write are you in a certain way.
Mhm.
It's like an actor, and I did stage acting for about 15 years. And you bring characters, no matter what you see and experience, other people, you watch them, we're people watchers, writers and actors. You bring them into you and then combine them in you, and they come out as the character. And so that's kind of how it is, I think, with writing too. People ask me, well, is it you? Is it someone you know? Is it people you've seen? And the answer is yes. It's all of those things. And it all comes through you because you're the creative force behind it. And just like good acting, it enters you and then comes out refined.
Although I think, I know for me, a lot of my characters also come from people around me.
Absolutely.
And I think it's a fascinating psychological study to me to write the people that you know or take bits and pieces of them. And I've had the same question where people say there are basically 3 main female characters in my series of books, and people want to try and guess which one is you. And it's like, well, none of them and all of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't have put it better.
That some of them might have the bad parts of me, some of them might have the weaker parts, some have the stronger, some have the better. So I really like your answer. That's so true. I wanted to ask, when I was reading your About Me, you used a lot of cooking analogies and applied that to writing, which I don't think I've seen before, or to describe your books. Are you also a cook?
I am not really a cook. My wife's a pretty good cook. I'm not a cook. And I use the analogy for research is because it used to be back in the olden days, back when we were younger.
Right.
Research was an intensive process. You're in libraries, looking in encyclopedias, you're calling people on the phone, speaking with experts, visiting sites. You can get that all now on the internet. So the tendency is for people to load up their work with research, and it turns into a training manual. So I kind of advise people that research is the spice. If you're making a soup, research is the spice that adds flavor, that adds little parts of truth to your lie, because we're all telling lies. We're doing fiction. We're making stuff up.
Yes, we lie for a living.
Right, so that it's like a con man. You get, you want to suck the person in, you got to give them a little truth, but you don't need a lot of it. You just need enough to make them believe you, because the real meat and potatoes of your soup are your characters and what they're going through and how they interact and how they're striving and what obstacles they face, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, that's a good analogy, is to use a soup or a stew, whereas, most people's lives are boring. You don't want to write boring. That's the water in the soup. It's the meat and potatoes, what they do, how they interact, and whatever, which is important. And the research is a little bit of spice that makes them believe.
Okay, I didn't know if you could hear the dog whining in the background.
No, I'm surprised my dog hasn't been barking back there.
You look like you're out on a porch. Does your dog try and come out when you're out there?
No, actually, this is not a porch. This used to be a porch, but now it's a built-in. And this is kind of my combination office and man cave. So you see my books over my left shoulder there.
I do, yes.
And a couple of firearms for kind of manliness above me. That's kind of, we've turned this into my office.
Okay, we have a similar porch, which is part of why I thought that's what it was. It's fully screened in. House walls on 3 sides and then a screened in front. So I would like to do something similar with that, make it another room. And making it my office would be great because I don't have an office. I have a kitchen counter. So what is your favorite meal to make, since we're talking about cooking?
Well, when I cook, I know a few. I've picked up my wife recipe for macaroni and cheese and for chicken soup and a few other things, but mostly it's barbecue. I'll get out on the grill and do chops or steaks or hot dogs, hamburgers, that kind of thing, chicken. So usually when the weather's nice, it's nice for much of the year in Tennessee.
Are you in Tennessee too?
Yeah, we're in Eastern Tennessee. we're between Knoxville and Gatlinburg, basically between Knoxville and
Okay.
Puget.
I know where that is, and I've been there quite a few times. So totally off topic, but have you been to the pirate show there?
I did not go to the pirate show. I went to the Titanic Museum recently.
I've been there. I've been there twice.
That was very interesting. I enjoyed that quite a bit.
Right. That's a great place to research if you want to write about the Titanic. So I have to ask, did your character live or die? I shouldn't say character. They're real people.
Yeah, the person I was assigned, I got the Jewish experience, Rene
Okay.
Levy, and he perished.
I'm sorry to hear that. I've had 3 cards in the 2 times I was there because somebody dropped theirs. I picked it up thinking I'd look around and see who was looking for their card. Never found them. And amazingly, all 3 of the people I was survived. So
wow, that is unusual.
Yeah, I hope I'm as lucky in real life as I am at the Titanic Museum. But so what is your favorite part of writing books? The plot, character, editing, anything at all?
Probably dialogue.
Okay.
I've been told my dialogue really, really works. And I always say, well, that's for 3 reasons. Number one, I've been watching movies my entire life. And movies are dialogue and action, visuals. I also did theater work, so I read a zillion plays. And plays are dialogue and stage direction. That's all they are.
Right.
So you learn a lot of dialogue. And third, I'm a big fan of Elmore Leonard.
Okay.
And he is known as kind of the king of dialogue. I learned character from Stephen King and dialogue from Elmore Leonard.
I was curious as you were talking about writing and what it needs to be good writing. Have you studied the craft? Have you taken classes, read books, or is it fairly natural to you?
Well, I've certainly read books like Stephen King's on writing and a few others. And I certainly took classes back in high school and college. But for me, and I agree with Stephen King on this, writing is mostly reading and writing. I mean, you read a lot and you got to write a lot, because just like a child learns how to speak from being spoken at, you learn how to write from reading, especially good writers. And I was fortunate back in grade school to have nuns beat things like sentence structure into me. And
Yep, I learned all of that.
Yeah.
I don't think that's taught anymore.
No. But even if you don't get that, you can pick it up from reading. And if you have to read a lot if you're going to write fiction. I'm sorry, people will say, well, I don't want to be influenced by other writers in my style. Well, you want to be influenced by other writers. That's the good thing. Sure, you don't want to copy them, but you want to be influenced by them. You want to learn from them. They're good at what they do. And read a lot in your genre, but read a lot of everything. A good writer is a good writer. If you read a good nonfiction book that reads like fiction, that's just as good.
Right. Because it takes some talent and skill either way to get the point across. Now, I am curious, how would you personally define a good writer? And the reason I ask is because some of the writers that are considered the good writers, the classics, the ones we're supposed to learn in college and high school, someone like, I believe it's James Joyce, is he the one who has these long, long rambling sentences?
Right.
And then you've got Hemingway, who's got the short little sentences. You've got the stream of consciousness type style. Not everybody likes that, and yet they're classified as the good writers. I'm thinking of someone like William Faulkner. We had to do As I Lay Dying in college, and that was a very bizarre book. But he's regarded as one of the great writers.
Well, my wife hates William Faulkner too, so you're.
No, I didn't use that language. It has made for some interesting, lines that have stayed with me throughout life, like "My mother is a fish."
Right.
That the poor child was a little messed up. But what would you say makes society think these people are good writers, and what would you personally say makes a good writer?
Well, for me personally, I have three main influences. I already mentioned Stephen King and Elmore Leonard, and the third one would be Hemingway, because he's the
Okay.
one who taught us that it doesn't have to be flowery, it doesn't have to be long. You can have short declarative sentences that will really get a lot of emotion across if they're properly structured and put together. So yeah, and good authors are like good art. I mean, you know them when you read them. You get an emotional response from you. Their work flows. This is something I learned doing nonfiction, like medical writing and stuff. When the work flows, it makes people think it's possibly better than it is, because they can understand it. It moves along. The points pop out logically. So there's that to it too. There's structure. There's word choice. All of these things come together. It's like that super stew we were talking about. They all come together to make. When I read now, I will say stuff like, "Boy, good writer, but overwritten," or "Good writer, but too many characters." Things like that. I'm now starting to evaluate as a writer rather than just as a reader. And but it's the way the sentences are put together, the way the words are chosen. Recently, with the death of Chris Christopherson, I think he was a phenomenal songwriter. And my favorite song of his is "Sunday Morning Coming Down," because the choice of words and how they're put together brings out an emotional response. And that's probably the definition more than anything to me, is bringing out an emotional response. And it may be on the edge of your seat. It may be crying. It may be depending on your genre and what you're doing. But, Stephen King will build these beautiful characters and then do terrible things to them and get you to love them and then, worry for them and stuff.
Right.
That's the essence of it. Stuff like that.
Yeah. One of the comments that people have made about my book is a lot of people say I almost didn't keep reading because I hated Sean so much. And I'm like, well, that's eliciting an emotion, that's for sure.
Right. Well, it depends. If it's a protagonist where people are supposed to like, then that's bad.
Well, no, he's meant to be awful.
If he's a villain, that's great. Certainly in Checkout Time, my Conrad Hilton, very interesting villain, and that's, I think, important. Writing villainy is that it can't be Snidely Whiplash of villains. It has to. They have to be interesting. Think Hannibal Lecter. Even humorous at times, and that makes, because the villain doesn't think of themselves as villainous. They're doing what they need to do to get what they want.
Right.
And, so yeah, your protagonist should be at least likable. Your villain should be at least interesting.
Well, that's one of the things that has frustrated me about some books, is that people are two-dimensional. Not in all books, obviously, not in many books, but the books that frustrate me, that's often a reason the good guys are all good.
Right.
I read a book years ago, and I'm not going to give the title, not because I want to protect the author, who I thought was horrible. I can't remember her name anyway. But more because it centers on a political issue. And that gets people automatically taking sides. Sure. But the problem with the book was, you knew the author's politics. It was obvious, because everybody on the side she disliked was pure evil, pure nastiness, selfishness, obnoxious, rude, and everybody on the political view that she agreed with, obviously, was noble and wonderful and generous. And I looked at that. I think that was actually a huge influence. Like, I don't think I ever would have written that badly, but I read that and I was like, this is crazy.
Right.
On any political issue.
And to me, that doesn't make a sense on a lot of levels, but mostly because you're going to PO, if you want to say that, half your audience. And
Right.
why do that? I made a specific point in my project Suicide, which has politicians in it because it's a techno thriller, but it's also partly a political thriller,
Okay.
to basically be neutral. You know, can't tell, we don't mention what political party or what side they're on or whether
Did
they're
you make
liberal.
up political parties, or how did you
No, I
avoid?
just, you just, for that particular thing, especially when you're dealing with politicians who are going to kill themselves, you can just kind of leave it neutral. You can say they're a rising star, they're, you know, that kind of things. You don't have to talk politics. And I made a very important conscious point of doing that, because most of the time it's not necessary, and you're making mad half of your readers, and they may not want to read you after that. So what's the point of that? That's not good marketing. And third, that's not really what the story is about. The story is about people's struggles, how they're overcoming them, how they're defeating the bad guy, whoever that happens to be. And, you know, I mean, Stephen King, although much as I love him, he tends to do that now. And there's absolutely no reason, as far as I can tell, he just inserts it for himself.
Right.
And that's very egotistical. And I'm not an egotistical kind of guy. You know, I also write characters that are kind of everyday kind of people. They have the warts of everyday people and everything. So I'm more like that.
Right. And I like to think that we should be able to learn and grow from most books, even if we're reading them for entertainment. We are absorbing ideas. And I think it just continues to divide us to go, oh, everybody on one side is bad, everybody.
Yeah.
That's not true. We're all good and bad. And that's the point that I really bring out with my characters is Sean starts off terrible. Neil, who's in the medieval times, seems to be the hero who is all good and pure and noble and blah, blah, blah. But bit by bit, you know, I bring out this idea that Sean does have his good points. He's built this orchestra up from nothing. He's made it successful. He's generous, although he'll never admit that to anyone. And Neil starts to realize that he's thought he's very much above Sean, but he starts to realize I am kind of arrogant. I do think I'm all that. And that's what I want people to get.
Yeah, that's the character arc, isn't it? You start off with one thing and they learn and grow, or they expose more of their hidden personality traits and stuff like that. When I did Project Suicide, my protagonist, Deacon Creel, he's very much a logical man who has trouble dealing with emotions, and that's his tragic flaw. His past keeps haunting him, which drives him to drink and things like that. And then he has Amy Robbins, his sidekick, who has been very compassionate, emotional through her life, but now she is forced to do things which appear harsh in order to create a better good outcome out of it. So they each have their character arcs.
Before I forget, because I have in the past, do you have your reading ready to go?
Yes, I do. At least I hope it is. It should be right here on my phone. Okay, this is, I could read from one of my books, but this is one of my favorite short stories that was published in an anthology called Hope. Very nice anthology, TRDL Press. I encourage anybody to purchase it. It's a charity anthology, so your money's going to good cause. And this is called The Journey. Bob could never remember a sky so blue. It almost hurt your eyes to look at it. That was a line from some movie about baseball. He smiled. Bo loved to chase baseballs. They fit perfectly in his big lab mouth. A nice Rawlings would last a week before getting too slimy and nicked. Bob bought them by the bagful, 10 for 10. Not bad entertainment for a buck. He'd toss one high and Bo would leap for it like Gary Pettis at the center field wall. He'd run back half the time, refusing to give the ball up, proud of himself as he played keep away. It was only when Bob feigned indifference that he would drop it. His look always one of penitence and hope that the game would continue. Funny what you remember when you're walking. He was walking, the grass cool beneath his bare feet, the sun warm and light against his arms. The arthritis was barely noticeable today. Well, you had good days and bad ones. Today was a good day. He felt better than he had since Bo was a pup. That was back in Tuckersville, the little farmhouse by the river, Bob's favorite place. He and Bo would run in the field behind the house, run barefoot in the grass as he was now. That was before the time of baseballs. That was the time of tag, you're it. Back in the days when Bob could turn sharper than the gangling pup. Bo would tumble, unable to match a sudden twist, then drop down on front paws, barking for the joy of the game. Later, it was Bob who couldn't match the pinpoints executed by his pal, the champion keep-away artist. He laughed at the thought. It felt good to laugh again. Lately, the cancer had eaten away laughter, along with much of his colon. Tears had been more common than laughter. He threw back his head and let mirth peel off the sunlit hills. Then he ambled on, smiling. The meadow looked familiar, like someplace he'd read about in a book, but never actually visited. Was he lost? The thought didn't scare him like it did at the rest home. Those times when he'd wake not knowing where he was or how he'd gotten there. Once he'd stumbled into the hall looking for Marcy. If he could just find Marcy at the time of Bo. Bob looked around as he walked, the lush green grass dotted with wildflowers and the bright cloudless sky. No, he'd never been here before, but it was familiar. And even though he didn't know where he was, he knew he wasn't lost. Strange how the two things could be compatible, he thought. A strange land, but one without fear, because he knew where he was going. He was making for the top of the hill dead ahead. He had been making for it the whole time he'd been walking. How long was that? He didn't know. He didn't care. Sometimes the fun was in the journey.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Kind of.
That was, as I wrote that, not that particular part, but it always made me cry. And if I read the whole thing, it would still make me cry at the end. And I'm pleased to see that both editors who evaluated independently both said it brought me to tears.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
That
So
really feels good to a writer.
And it has a hopeful ending.
Very much so. I was kind of thinking of my own dog as you were reading that because she's very old. She's 10 and a half and her breed normally only lives 6 to 8 years. So
what breed is it?
Irish Wolfhound.
Yeah, they're sweeties, but they don't last a long time.
Right.
Veterinary practice.
Yeah. So any last words of wisdom you would like to pass on to our listeners?
Well, anybody who wants to write, read a lot and write a lot. Those are the two main things you got to do. You have to be consistent with your writing. I like to say you have to treat it like a hobby and a business. A business, you do it every day. A hobby, you do it because you love to do it. If you don't love to do it, it's probably not for you. I hope everybody reads Checkout Time and Project Suicide. The easiest way to get to them is checkouttimenovel.com and projectsuicidenovel.com, all one words, and takes you right to Amazon. Of course, they're available, Barnes & Noble and everything else. And I would also like to tell anyone, this is not just about my books, but any author's book that you like. Leave a review. It doesn't take long, and it means a lot. It means a lot to the author, and it means a lot to Amazon or Barnes & Noble or whatever, and how they place the author. So it's a small thing, but it really helps a lot.
It does help a lot. And so you also have a personal website, don't you?
Yes, it's thrillerjohnb.net.
Okay. And are you on any of the social medias?
I'm on Facebook. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter. I'm on those two. I'm also on LinkedIn, although I'm not very active on LinkedIn. I'll have to say that's more business to business. And I'd love to hear from you. You can drop me a line off my website or message me on Facebook. And I said in my bio, I have 17 short stories. It turned into 18 because I just had one picked up like a week and a half ago.
Great.
And I'm hoping to bring out my own anthology of like 18 to 20 short stories over the next year or so.
That's ambitious. But it
Well,
sounds like
the
you
stories are written. I've
mostly
just got to
got-
write some connecting material for them.
Right. So I can be found at lauravosica.net. Our sponsor is gabrielshornpress.com. I keep forgetting one. Oh, the obvious, booksandbrews.net.
And Brews.
And yep. And if you would like to see our wonderful sheep and rabbits and chickens, we are at glenmurrellfarms.wordpress.com because I didn't feel like paying fees for yet another site. So we're doing the free version on that one. And I am on social media on all of those things. It would take me an hour and a half to list all of those handles. You can probably find them through my sites. And that concludes Books and Brews number 12 with John Bukowski. Cheers.
Cheers.